This is we're getting into the mystery of the four levels of song in the second iteration of this. So we're holding over here. You can find the sources on soundheitsrecords.com in the Chassidus music classes section or in the events section if you're watching it live. And it's a Hasidic discourse that's in Hebrew. That's we're in the process of working on a translation with an elucidation based on these classes and other sources, of course. Because this mimer, this Hasidic discourse from the Alter Rebbe of Shneur Zalman of Liadi is a very shortened version from a longer one that's available that I've used to prepare this, and maybe at some point we can go more into those texts which illuminate this. And then there's a much longer one from the Mittler Rebbe, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, which goes into more detail in explaining, because this is it's a very challenging concept to understand. This idea of the four songs and what's its significance, what's its importance, especially as musicians looking to apply these concepts to our lives, to our music. There's a lot of resonances I sense in this idea of four and what that means practically and musically, what it means in terms of emotionally, in the specifics of musical theory, but also primarily we're talking about Chassidus, so we're talking about the deeper spiritual expression of music, the transformative power of music, the way to, not necessarily even in a global way, though of course that's the case, but in an individual way, looking inward deeply to see the potential that we have and how often that we get in the way of our own potential. So we've been speaking about one of the primary themes of Chassidus music is the idea of getting out of the way of the music, that there is a divine music that's happening, that is resonating with our souls, that our material over-identification, our egos can get in the way, our unrefined aspects of ourselves can get in the way. And through the process of refining ourselves and becoming more humble, becoming more deeply humble, there's different levels of humility. There's an external humility and there's an internal humility. So as the Alter Rebbe says elsewhere, actually in this week's Parshas Achrei, in the Kutei Torah, he talks about the idea of tshuva, of transformation, inner return. And there's a chitzonius tshuva, there's an external tshuva, and there's an internal tshuva. So that's like a transformation. One can transform themselves on the outside, and then one can also transform themselves on the inside. And obviously they can go hand to hand, but it's possible that personal development and change is only skin deep. So to really get down to the inner core and to really transform in a really full way is obviously the goal, right? To go deeper. And it's not just about us as individuals, it's about the whole world. The idea of the true and complete redemption, Ha'geula Hamitis V'Shlema, is something that is a transformative thing that affects not just the whole world, but every aspect of creation. As the Rebbe talks about in Parshas Achrei in 1991, goes into great detail about what is our job in this world, in this time. And it's to bring the true and complete redemption. And the idea of the true and complete redemption is we look around ourselves in the world which we're used to, the world of exile that's been for so many generations, and that we're still experiencing the effects of now. That we look at each detail and we see potential in everything to be redeemed, its true purpose to be revealed. So that's what the redemption is. The Geula is not something that destroys. Humility is not something where we destroy ourselves. We actually use ourselves. We use every part of ourselves, even the more challenging parts of ourselves. Maybe those are our greatest strengths, and we use them for their ultimate purpose, to reveal the inner humility, meaning reveal that to be the channel, the vessel for the divine music. And so we affect the world that way, that the world should become a vessel for the divine music. We don't destroy anything. We don't have to, the world doesn't have to be overturned. We don't have to overturn our lives to become the idealized versions of ourselves. We don't have to superimpose some kind of harsh discipline or breaking ourselves. On the contrary, we need to take every aspect and refine it and make it the best. Right? And that's the idea. We're in the period of time of Sfiras HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. It's 49 days, 7 weeks. And there's 7 spheres, 7 personality characteristics that we're going to talk about a few here in the Mimer as it regards to music. And each one of these is applicable to music. And so why is it's 49? Because it's 7 times 7. So each one of these 7 has within it 7, the other 6 aspects, or the full 7 aspects within that one. So for example, the first we work on is chesed. That's the attribute of kindness, the attribute of expansiveness, of giving. In musical terms, this is the idea of sweetness or happiness. And in the Sfiras HaOmer, the first week after Pesach, we went through each dimension of kindness, right? There's chesed shebechesed, which is kindness of kindness, and then gevura shebechesed, which is the stricture, the discipline of kindness, and then tiferes shebechesed, which is the beauty, the balance, the compassion of kindness. We're deepening the experience of kindness, so kindness is not just, for example, just spread out everywhere without any discernment, but has a sense of proportion, right? Through sometimes being kind, through withholding, could be an idea of tiferes, and then it continues the netzach, the victory, right? And then so the overcoming, meaning if there's obstacles to the kindness, then the victory, that the midah of netzach comes into play, right? And then hod, which is a beauty or a splendor, or the idea of true humility, deep humility, of kindness. And then yesod, which is it fixes, it makes it a consistent, fixed thing, a commitment thing. And then you have malchus shebechesed, which is the idea of dominion, of the real fullness and strength, the complete kindness, right? So if someone is working on their midah of kindness, I want to be a kinder person. So it's not just, well, I'm just going to give more, right? That's the general idea. We try to be a kinder person, but I try to refine it on every dimension, get down to those 7 details. And so obviously we're past the week of Chesed, but it's never too late, obviously, to work on any of these things. But these are the specific times to work on it. And of course, we went through the week of Gevura. We went through the week, we just finished the week of Tiferes, and now we're beginning the week of Netzach. Tonight is Chesed Shebenetzach, the kindness of victory, of overcoming obstacles. So it's different than the using the power to overcome to strengthen our kindness. Now we're using our kindness to strengthen our ability to overcome. So that's just a little bit of an intro into what the practical application of Sfiras HaOmer is, that this mitzvah to count every night, to specifically count a number. But the way this applies to what we're learning here is the idea of having true humility to be a channel for the music, is the idea of a self-refinement that takes into account every dimension of our personality, and not necessarily, and doesn't just push aside, let's say, a part of us we don't like, we bury, right? That often doesn't work because it leads to resentment. But even if it is successful, then it's not a complete tshuva, it's not a complete redemption, because there's a part of us that's, so to speak, left behind. So we have the ability, we have we're encouraged, we have the invigoration to be able to accomplish this. That one shouldn't think that this is too hard, or that it's too late in life to accomplish this, that anybody can accomplish this at any point. This is something that we're promised in the Torah. And specifically, the Rebbe guarantees us this ability with sources from the Torah. So now to get into this idea of the 4 levels of song. So we said that the 4 levels of song, right? Shir Pashut, the simple song. Shir Kafel, the doubled song. Shir Shalosh, the tripled song. In Shir Meruba, the fourfold song, or the square song, right? Meruba could also be a square, parallels the idea of what we spoke about earlier in the Maimer, that the power of music and the purpose of music and the nature of music is the idea of this humility. But it's not just a simple humility, right? It's humility that enables any kind of revelation, that enables any kind of growth. And in order for that growth to happen in the world, in any dimension, and we're talking about the spiritual realms, but obviously this applies to the physical realms as well, it has to be with music. Music is the function by which we're able to quiet or humble the earlier dimension and then engage with the higher dimension, with a new perspective. So these four levels, so that's in general what music does. And we said that there's this idea of the souls that go up from the lower Gan Eden, the lower spiritual realm, to the higher spiritual realm. They need two roles of music, right? Yotzin Bashir, they go out, they exit the lower level with a song. The song allows them to escape the earlier place, to leave the earlier perspective and be open to the new, higher level. And then V'nichnasen Bashir, and they enter with a shir, that the song enables them to grasp the new level. So that's in a sense two applications of the song that both imply this idea of bittul, or this kind of humility. But then when we get into the four different levels, right, each of these four levels, right, are a different kind of bittul, the Alter Rebbe says. And so we can get into more particulars. So the first level, the Shir Pashut, we said, is beyond particulars. This is just complete humility. We use the example of someone who's completely overawed by a figure, by a great leader or a great celebrity, even, to use an analogy. That someone is completely overawed, they completely lose the sense of self. You can't attribute their humility to any particular thought or any particular emotion, other than just being humbled by the greatness of this person that they're in front of, or this experience that they're experiencing. That's Shir Pashut. So then they're to understand the other levels, understand the purpose of the other levels, is to get into this, so to speak, humility that is specific to us. Because this idea of Shir Pashut, so again, we used the example last week of one could use music to completely escape reality, could completely become a channel for the divine reality with music, and it's a wonderful, beautiful thing. But ultimately, when a person comes back, it maybe to a certain extent they've had this amazing experience and it was life-changing and mind-opening. But the person themselves are not necessarily changed. The inner powers of a person did not engage in that humility. They were just overpowered, overwhelmed by this tremendous sense of awe, of humility. So while there's a role for Shir Pashut, and Shir Pashut seems to be the ultimate goal, but nevertheless, Shir Pashut is just the beginning. Because the ultimate is we want to have that sense of inner transformation, inner humility, where we actually have a consistency and an ability to summon that humility and to be a channel in a consistent way, and in particular to be able to allow the dimensions of ourselves to join in that divine song and not just be pushed out, so to speak, pushed out of the way while it's happening, which is in itself an accomplishment, right? Because most people walk around with all sorts of thoughts in their heads and emotional blockages. So to just be able to get out of the way, and there are people who use drugs to accomplish this, but that is essentially the drawback of drugs, besides among other things, as being used specifically to achieve higher spiritual states, or to be able to get out of the ego and the mind out of the way to channel the music, is it doesn't involve a person's personality engagement, their intellectual engagement as a prerequisite. It kind of can overwhelm. So obviously there's that's a whole other discussion. I'm not going to get into if it can be used properly and the appropriateness of it. Needless to say, this avoda that we're talking about, Chassidic avoda, does not require, and maybe the certain substances, or most substances, could get in the way when we start talking about really having a clarity of getting into these particular other levels. So he says shir kafel. So what is shir kafel? The doubled song. So the Alter Rebbe says, so ultimately we're going to go through the doubled song, the tripled song, and the quadruple song, and see it from a couple different angles which are related. So first of all, we'll just repeat a line inside. So if you look at the Maimer in the right-hand column, again, the source is at soundheitsrecords.com, class number 20, or you can find it in the events page if you're watching live. So it says like this. So we're in the right-hand column, in the bottom paragraph, about halfway, or a little less than halfway from the bottom. And the line starts acher, and it's the word in the middle, v'chesha bittul. Okay, v'chesha bittul, bittul pashut, nikra shir pashut. So when the musical, the nullification, the humility that's affected by music is of a simple nature, meaning it's not complicated, it's not driven by particular thoughts or emotions, it's called shir pashut. It's a simple song. It's an undifferentiated song. But when there is a midah involved, when there's an inner power, an inner personality involved in this, meaning that precipitates this bittul, not that necessarily is overwhelmed and sparked by it, but that precipitates it. Nikra shir couple, that's a doubled, because it's either, so we're going to see this in a couple different ways. So it's either ava or yira, it's either love or awe, right? Chesed or gavura, right? Sweetness or bitterness, right? Darker music, right? In terms of musical terms, right? Either one or the other, that shir couple, it's a duality, but it's driven by a particular emotion, right? A desire to express love, a desire to express fear, to express a certain kind of awe, and over the awesomeness of creation, or the awesomeness of experiences. So that's a shir couple. So shir meshulash of a kashayesh is chalus amidas. But when there's a combination of those two, ava v'yira gam shneim bittul. So both the ava v'yira, both the love and fear, are combined in this humility. Nikra shir meshulash. That's what, in this particular way of looking at it, is called the threefold song. So because you have, on one hand, you have the duality of love, and you have the awe, and you have the hisklalus, the combination of them creates a third thing. So that's right. So we there's a couple different ways to look at it. So before we get into the four dimensions, let's talk about the couple of different ways. So one of the ways that the Alter Rebbe says, and again the longer Maimer, is that the duality, the shir couple, the doubled song, is when one song, meaning when one of the personality traits is being expressed, or the other. That's the shir couple. It's either one or the other. And shir meshulash is when they both are. So it means it kind of creates a third thing through both of their inter-inclusion, right? It's like a third reality. And so you have either ava, so in musical terms, let's say, you have a song that sounds happy. That's like maybe a major key, but in its core, it's sad, right? And so that like a major, we talked about before, like a major 7 chord is kind of like this, right? It in its root, in its foundational 3 notes, it's major, which is a connotation of brightness or happiness. But then if you look at the extension of the chord, right, the 3 top notes, it's a minor chord, right? It's kind of like concealing bitterness or sadness within the happiness, right? So a lot of songs with major 7 chords have this bittersweet quality, right? On the other hand, you have songs that are externally darker, but internally happy, and there are songs like that where you have certain, to use an example, a minor chord, right? A minor song, but it has a bounce to it, or just to speak harmonically, you might have let's say a minor ninth, right? A minor ninth chord, which is an extension which includes a major, it goes a major 7 chord at the top and a minor chord at the bottom. But in some ways you could say a minor 7 Minor 7 is the opposite of a major 7 in terms of what we're talking about. Whereas a major 7 would have a major chord at the bottom and then a minor chord at the top. Minor 7 chord would have a minor 7 chord at the bottom and a major 7 chord at the top. So those might be two chordal examples of how those work. And that would be a shir couple, a shir mushulash, I'm sorry, the threefold song. So that's, and then the fourfold song would be, so because you have, in that sense, you have one emotion that's revealed and one that's concealed, and that's called threefold. So fourfold would be both of them are revealed, right? So there's four dimensions. There's the sadness that includes the happiness, and then there's the happiness that includes the sadness, right? And all of them are being revealed. It's not that one is hidden behind the other. They're all four are being expressed. And so this is, again, this is something that I'm working with at the concepts as I learn them and as I'm sharing them. I'm interested in any feedback anyone might have, any perspectives, connections to this idea of these numbers and their practical application to music from what we're learning here in the Chassidus. Just want to throw it out to soundheitsrecords@gmail.com. Please, one way to contact me with any thoughts or ideas on this concept, let alone comments on this video, wherever you're watching, Facebook, YouTube, or Vimeo. So, to continue within the text, we're going to talk about another way to see these four. Okay, he says in a parentheses here, in the small letters, "V'ayin mashikasav be'inyan techeles v'argaman v'salas shani v'sheish mashzar shemisklalas dal b'chinas yachad." So there's a pasuk. There's a fabric in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle in the desert that was built by Moshe, by Moses. There are certain fabrics that are involved in this holy structure, and it was woven from these four types of threads, and this idea of what they represent, and as is expressed in other places, and the Rebbe is just referring to it here, that this idea of these four different aspects are being combined together into a single aspect. So what he says, it's like this, interesting, four aspects here. He says Ava they all come together as one, but they're four. So Ava v'yira, right? So love and awe. V'rachmanos, compassion, which is connected with the sphere of Tiferes. U'bechinas sheish, and the idea of sheish, which is a certain type of fabric. Hu ha'ava misuteres, that's the hidden love. The hidden love that's behind the other three. So this is a parallel idea of four that's being referred to. So let me share before we go on in the text. If we are going to go in the text this time, or we'll go to continue next week within the text to going into the idea of the four winds. But before we get to the four winds, the Alter Rebbe gives another perspective on the four levels of song. We just said, right, that the first level is shir pashut. It's just a simple level of song. I mean, there's no emotions involved. It's just a pure nullification, humility. And then you have shir kafel, which is either one or the other, either ava or yira, either sweetness or bitterness, right? Light or darkness. And then you have shir meshulash, which was a more complex combination of the two, which creates a third thing, which is either sweetness in a revealed way and darkness hidden, or darkness revealed way and with the sweetness hidden. All right, so that's shir meshulash, the threefold song, and then the fourfold is where there's four aspects, meaning there's nothing, so to speak, hidden. The two aspects, and they're two. If we call it in synthesizer world, the FM synthesis operators, right? So in synthesis, you have a main tone, and then you have a secondary tone that's changing the tone, that's operating on it. So you could say like this with these characteristics. You have the ava, the sweetness in the music, that's being operated on, that's being conducted by the darkness behind it. And then you have the sweetness, the darkness that's being operated on by the sweetness. And in the fourfold song, these four are are all interacting in a revealed way. It's interesting in this synthesizer that I have. It's an FM synthesizer, right? Yamaha Reface DX based on the classic DX. There's 4 operators in this creation of the FM synthesis. Just another parallel. I was making a list earlier today actually of different 4s in music, and I'm interested to hear people feedback connections with 4. Something we can get into. But just to describe the other way of looking at it, so the second way of looking at it is a little different. So that the sheer couple is this idea of the 2 voices, both possibly existing, the Av and Yir, the sweetness and the darkness. That's not 3 in this model, it's 2. Right, so you have Ava and Yira, right, because those things are 2. Love and awe, sweetness and bitterness are operating together. That's 2. So 3 is what's called a machriya, meaning the deciding third voice. So there's, for example, in Jewish law, you have what's called a beis din, a court of rabbis, which has to be an odd number, and typically it's at the least it has to be 3, right? Because you could have 2 opinions. You could have an opinion that says the defendant is guilty. You have another opinion that says the defendant is innocent, and there you have a loggerhead, right, of 2 opinions, right? That's also why, the Supreme Court is 9 members, because the third voice is the one that's going to machriya, that's going to choose, right? Which is going to see which way we're going to go, right? So you have guilty or innocent, depending. The third one will ultimately decide, right? So that's the third voice. It's that third deciding voice, which in terms of bitterness or sweetness, it's a third type of color, which is neither bitter or sweet, but is something else. Is something that kind of combines the 2 to create its own thing. That's the 3. So then interesting. So then the 4 is actually, you might have 3 judges and 3 opinions, but once you join them all together, they broadcast a single opinion, and that's the 4th opinion. Right, because ultimately, the final opinion is not like any of them in particular. Because this one wanted to judge most favorably. This one wanted to judge most harshly. This one leaned maybe towards harshly, but ultimately the opinion comes out that it is somewhere in between all of them, and that is the 4th. Right, so that's just another way of looking at it. The four voices, the 4 types of song, the 4 dimensions of songs. You could have bitter, sweet music, and bitter music, right? And the combination, you have something that's kind of tipping it in one way or the other, but utilizing both aspects. And then you have the music as a whole, right? That's broadcasting a general feeling or general sense of the humility as a whole. So how does it apply to humility in our self-refinement? Well, we use the music and we use these expressions of our different aspects of ourselves as we go through a process through Sefiras HaOmer of self-reflection. So similarly, in the introspection of music, we're being not necessarily contriving, but cultivating a sense of, and sometimes it comes out spontaneously, but we can craft it to a certain degree, of what are we expressing, what is necessary for the moment, right, for our own lives, for the atmosphere around us. Does the music need to be sweeter? Does it need to be darker? Right? There's a purpose for darker music. When David HaMelech played music for his father-in-law Shaul, who was very, very depressed, he needed to play darker music to remove the ruach ra. Right? So we need to. So sometimes when someone is very happy and they want to dance, you got to play a sweeter music. Sometimes you need a combination. Sometimes there's more complex emotions. And same with us when we're unraveling the mystery that's our own psyche, that's our own emotional status. We can use music to aid in that regard. And the music we create is a process of self-refinement, a process of humbling ourselves to channel the higher music. Then so the fourfold song. Then the 2, 3, and 4. Interestingly enough, we're calling 2, 3, and 4, but obviously all of them include that shir pashut. All of that include that very basic, which is very important, that very fundamental humility, which is beyond all particulars, because we're always looking to connect the highest level with the lowest level. So, just to go, so before we conclude tonight, and again, I would love to hear from people different ideas of 4, but I was just thinking about the ideas of 4 in music, And there's, so one example uses the chords. So 3-note chords have a certain flavor, right? 2-note chords have little flavor, right? You have a power chord as a 2-note chord, right? So you could look at these 4 levels and the idea of 4 notes, right? So you have a single note, which could be parallel. Again, this is not exactly, because there's a lot of the main thrust of these teachings of the 4 levels of song is about avoda. It is about personal refinement and growth and how that's connected to music. But we can certainly connect it to our actual music and how we create it. So there's different ways to think about it. One of the ways, again, think about a single note, right? The Maimar using an example also, Shir Pashut is a shofar note, a shofar blow, which is a single tone. Then you can have Shir Couple, which is 2 notes, right? So 2 notes could be a variety of different intervals, right? But these 2 notes together, they have a certain definition, they have a certain flavor, but they're still more or less undefined. Like a fifth, you don't know if it's minor or major. But then you can have 2 notes that create a minor or major interval. But without the fifth, it's lacking a certain expressive structure, right? So once you have the third, the 3 notes, right? Let's say a root, third, and fifth. Then you have the structure, which is the root and the fifth, and then you have the third, which is the color, right? And so that gives you the 3 could be parallel to the threefold song, giving the music the color, right? So obviously, an obvious example that we can get much more complex is a major chord is often connected with sweetness or happiness, ava, chesed, and minor chord often connection with gevura or bitterness, more dark chord. But then 4-note chord, right? You're starting to get into sevenths, and sevenths define the chord further. It adds another color to the song, to the chord, and so 4-note chords really have a richness of emotion in them. Right? As we mentioned before, a major 7 chord, a minor 7 chord. They have a very complex emotional vocabulary in them, and this is the idea of the 4-note chord. So when you go, what if you could ask about chord extensions? What if I extend another? I do a 9th, right? So I could have 9th is 5 notes. So interestingly, in studying jazz, one of the things you learn in terms of comping voices is that essentially to create any chord, you really only need 4 notes, even the higher extension chords. 4 notes to define those chords, to capture those expressive emotions. So usually the root, and then the 3 other notes, which are often leaving out the 5th. So for some reason, once you have chord extensions, the 5th becomes less important. Interestingly, with a 3rd or even a 7th, the 5th seems to take on a certain importance. But once you have, but it seems that 4 notes is a solid structure. It's 4 notes to play off each other, and of course there could always be more notes, but essentially it seems that's a thing. So it's just some beginning of a thought of how to apply these, particularly musically. I'd love to hear your feedback on other ideas how to apply it musically. I thought of the 4 augmented chords. There's a lot of different ways to go, but please be in touch with me. soundheitsrecords@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in and checking out these classes. You can always go to soundheitsrecords.com for more classes, to make a donation. And everyone should be blessed, should be healthy, happy, put a lot of music into their lives, a lot of music into the world, and we should bring Mashiach and the true and complete redemption